Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy, you can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Hello, female athletes and exercisers. You will understand by the end of this episode why I just said that. We have a guest here today, Dr. Nicky Keay. She is a doctor, exercise endocrinologist, and hormone researcher based out of London in the UK. Dr. Nicky's aim is to redefine optimal health and fitness for the individual. Her approach integrates all aspects of her professional clinical experience with her medical research expertise in endocrinology. Dr. Nicky offers a clinical advisory service for those seeking a more personalized, evidence-based approach to optimizing their health. She conducts clinical endocrine research, frequently publishes in medical journals, presents at medical conferences, and is currently writing a book about hormones. A little bit about her past. She attended Cambridge University, has been a member of the Royal College of Physicians, and a research fellow at St. Thomas Hospital. She has worked with so many institutions for medical scholarships and research, which will be listed in the show notes with her official bio. Dr. Keay is an Honorary Clinical Lecturer in Medicine and Fellow in the Department of Sport and Exercise Sciences at Durham University. She's a member of the British Menopause Society and British Association of Sports and Exercise Medicine. Dr. Nicky is Chief Medical Officer at Forth, which we will speak of later on in this podcast as well, her work with Forth. And so long story short, she's an amazing expert to learn from today on the podcast. So Dr. Nicky Keay, welcome. And we're excited to have you.
Listen, thanks so much for the invitation. Likewise, looking forward to having a good discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get lots of information out of you. And so we're excited for that. You know, obviously going over your bio, you have lots of experience in sports endocrinology, but I'd love to hear your personal background. I've listened to your podcasts and episodes you've been on and other podcasts in the past. So I know that you yourself have been a dancer, competitive swimmer, and I'd love to just hear a little bit about your journey and why, you know, as an athlete yourself, hormones became such an important topic for you to explore professionally.
Yeah, well, like you said, I was always interested in sport. I suppose ballet was always and still is my main passion. I still do 4 classes a week. So, yeah, I was always active, ballet, like you say, other things, competitive swimming for a while, tennis. I was in the tennis team, gymnastics. You know, I was doing a lot of stuff as a youngster. But then I just sort of was thinking, this is really interesting, how we're able to do this. It's like, the human body is amazing, these things. I ask it to swim fast up and down doing butterfly, and then I ask it to do, you know, point work, and then it will do all these things. And, you know, hopefully you get better as well. And so that just got me thinking, why? I mean, that's great, but what's happening? How does it work inside? What's happening? So that I can now, from just doing a couple of fouettes on point, now after practicing, I can do many more. So that was just like a curiosity thing. And so that led me therefore to study medicine, because I want to know what's happening with the human body, and then specifically hormones, because I began to realize that those are really complicated. I like complicated things. I like trying to work out puzzles. I like trying to work out tricky things, you know? I like that. Sounds weird, but
hormones are like a puzzle. Hormones are like a puzzle.
Exactly.
For sure.
So I really enjoyed that challenge, and also it links directly to your performance, when we say performance, I mean, whether it's an athletic performance, whether it's a mental performance, whether it's just whatever it is, those are all dependent on how your hormone networks are working. So that's how come, number one, it was hormones. And then number two, the link with exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. Hormones are complicated. And that's why I'm so excited to talk to you about them today, because they're so important. And it is so much of a puzzle to try and figure out what's going on, but they're so important, right? So I think we'll focus a lot of our conversation today about, what happens with a lack of hormones in your performance, but you can even flip this and know about having proper levels of hormones. In fact, in a weird way, I know you've done research on doping and stuff like that. And this is not promoted in what we should be doing, but it's this helps you.
No, exactly. Yeah, well, yes, it's not the best way to advertise hormones, as it were, but yes, you do wonder why 75% of doping offences are hormones, because they do support performance. There's no two ways about it. Obviously, as you say, we're not promoting that you do that, and far better to use natural methods, i.e. training and nutrition, and not try and cheat and shortcut, because that means the body is in control. That's the key thing. The body is control. But if you take external hormones, apart from the fact it's cheating and illegal, it's not, but also actually it's very unhealthy, you see, because the body is amazing at sorting this out. Just as hormones are so complicated and fascinating, it's equally amazing and complicated how the body has, over millions and millions of years of evolution, it's got a very, very good control system in place, which responds very, very well and correctly to, challenges you throw at it. Whether that's training, it will know what to do. It just, you know what I mean? So actually, of course, there are conditions where, medical conditions where things don't quite work out so well, but generally trusting in your body that it will do it if you're kind to it, if you present it with the good balance of the exercise and the nutrition, etc., then actually it's really, really amazing bit of machinery, all right, complicated engineering inside. So it will actually, it actually will really help. It wants you to be fit and healthy, if I can put it like that. It will support you to do that.
Absolutely right. Hormones are such an important part of our athletic performance. We don't want too much / it's also illegal, but we also don't want too little. And in the work that I do and the work that you do, we are seeing so many athletes struggle with having an imbalance in hormones, mostly on the side of a lack of hormones. We see a lot of female athletes with low estrogen, progesterone, luteinizing hormone. We even see a lot of male athletes with low testosterone. And this is, we don't have to go into all the details of the definition of RED-S. All my listeners, I have previous episodes on what is relative energy deficiency in sport. It's actually episode 2, and I think it was episode 19. We had Dr. Emily Krause on here talking about RED-S and bone health. Yeah, you know her. She's wonderful.
Yeah, I know her. She's done a brilliant post on it. So, but I think that is but just to sort of really go back to the fundamentals, how do people get to that situation? It is an imbalance in the behaviors, right? So if your energy intake isn't sufficient compared to your energy expenditure, and of course we have psychological factors, then quite sensibly, we just said how amazing the body is at keeping everything balanced as far as it can and working to its best. So the body quite sensibly recognizes that there's an energy deficit and it cannot do everything it's meant to be doing based on not enough energy. So quite sensibly, it looks for a way to economize. It goes into eco mode, right? Eco mode in women includes switching off your periods because that saves energy. In men, same thing applies. It will save energy if you, lower down the reproductive axis hormone-wise and the testosterone goes low. So that is fundamentally why low energy availability, you end up with REDS, that's the clinical outcome, adverse clinical outcome, because the body is amazing, sorting itself out and tries to save energy, power off. When your phone, it comes up, power saving mode, and you can switch off non-essential apps and all that sort of thing. It's just doing the same thing in your body. So that's what that is. But the good news is that, your behaviors very, very strongly influence your hormones. So just as that got you into that situation by having an imbalance in your behaviors, equally, it's difficult, I know, but if you can overchange those behaviors and readjust them, guess what? The body will do its business and the hormones will reboot and everything will be working as it should.
Yeah, what a great way to say it. We don't want to scare people into thinking, your hormones are just out of whack. It's like, no, this is fixable. Something caused them to be out of whack. Focusing on your behaviors around exercise, training, sleep, lifestyle, and what behaviors can you change to get your hormones back in balance. It's a very, the way you said that just makes it very, okay, we can do something about this, right? And that's really good. And I love the little analogy of like your body in eco mode, just like your phone, when battery's running low, it starts shutting off certain apps and things like that. And that's what's happening to your body as well. So if we charge our phone, give our phone more energy, stop using it all the time, it'll restore itself in the same way that your body will too. Give your body more energy, give it some rest, let it charge up, and then you're back in full power once again. What a great metaphor.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, talking about these behaviors, we do see so many behaviors in sport, whether it's undereating, disordered eating, eating disorders, over exercise. We have some crazy statistics that say things like 62% of female athletes experience disordered eating, or nearly 25% of collegiate athletes have menstrual dysfunction. And I say crazy because it's shockingly, like, when you see the numbers, you're like, whoa, that's a lot. But I think in reality, it's like, yeah, this is very common. It's not good, but it's very common. And you and I know that as working in this field. I'm curious to hear your perspective, specific to sports like dance and the performing arts and more of those artistic sports, because that's a little bit of a specialty of yours. Are those numbers similar, higher, lower? Like, how much does disordered eating and some of the behaviors of overexercise, underfueling, hormone imbalance affect athletes of those artistic sports?
Yeah, well, I think you make a very good point. Although the name is REDS, a relative energy deficiency in sport, actually, we should just say in exercise in general, because elite athletes, I know there are some, but generally elite athletes will have the advantage of having the backup of, a dietitian, a doctor, etc. But actually, it's the aspiring amateur athlete or dancer where you won't have all that backup and, bombarded by, I have to blame social media a bit or whatever, and that's what I found in my recent dance study. So in the answer to your question is absolutely it can affect dancers. So we're not just talking about sport, and we're not talking even elite or professional level. We're talking all levels and we're talking all ages. We think of it more as teenagers, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, but actually, masters athletes in their 40s, 50s, it can be the same thing. So yes, certainly all sorts of sports, all ages, all levels, and certainly in the athletic sports like diving and rhythmic gymnastics, we know that REDS can be high level, like you say, but certainly in dancers, from my recent survey at the end of last year, we did an international survey, and yeah, it was a little bit scary. That was male and female dancers that actually were quite high levels. Although my recent work with a professional company has shown actually the levels aren't that high. So again, I think it goes back to the aspiring, the amateur, the student who doesn't have all the resources and doesn't actually understand the long-term consequence of it. By the time you've got a professional contract with a company, I mean, yes, we have to say sadly there will be some dancers who will run into problems. But actually, in order to hold down your job basically and perform well and get chosen for good parts, you have to be healthy, we know there are some exceptions, but yeah, it's definitely something. I think those statistics you quoted, that's, as you say, concerning, that it's more than you expect. And I think part of the reason is because there is a perception of, number one, it's only women. I had a male athlete who said to me, well, how would you feel if you got told you had the female athlete triad? So, so number one, men, we know where they're probably underrepresented. We don't know if, anyway, certainly in the cycling study I did, male cyclists, actually, there was quite a few that I was concerned about. So it's men, and also, like we said, the different It's not just this elite thing. I have lots of people come and see me and they almost apologize. They say, oh, I'm not an athlete. It's like, yes, you're not an athlete, yet why are you training, exercising so much and avoiding carbohydrates and all these other things? So I think that's the other thing we really need to make clear, that it could happen to any of us for whatever reason.
Thank you so much for saying that. And, I want to be the first to say, because this is the Female Athlete Nutrition Podcast, but the definition of athlete, this doesn't mean you have to be pro. It doesn't mean you have to even consider yourself that, but it is, you're exercising, you're training, you're using your body, and you need to fuel.
Yeah, exactly. So any form of exercise, you're training effectively, especially if you're training more than, on a regular basis, more than once a week. What's the definition of training or exercise, And especially some of the people I see who are exercising and saying they're not an athlete, it's like, well, yes, you might not think you're an athlete, but you're training as much as a professional athlete, yet you're not feeling like they would, and you haven't got all the backup and everything, and you're not taking enough recovery, you're not taking a rest day, you're not doing polarized training, all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like start calling yourself an athlete, and then maybe you will start doing things the recovery way, fueling the right way. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that I see this in my experience a lot too, that, it's a lot of the younger high schoolers or recreational amateurs, people who are like, well, I'm not at that level, but it's like, well, you almost need to start acting like you are, so you can start doing the recovery, the sleep, the proper nutrition. Otherwise, you shouldn't be training as you are.
Yeah, well, you've got to get into good habits, like anything in life. If you want to take something seriously, maybe not professionally, but if you want to take something seriously and you want to do it to the best and get the most enjoyment, actually, you should be considering everything. If you sit down to do whatever it is, a piece of work, I don't know, writing up an essay or something. Thankfully, I don't have to do many of those. But anyway, or writing up a paper, for example. If you do it in a slapdash way, it's not going to cut it. So actually, if you're going to do the exercise, you might as well make sure you get the most out of it, and you support your hormones so that you get the most out of it mentally and physically, and enjoyment-wise, of course. So I guess it's just that sort of case of almost having a professional approach, I suppose. Yes, we don't want to say that people often do exercise for the enjoyment, but I think my argument will be you're going to enjoy it more if you feel you're doing it well. You see?
I agree.
If you actually have the energy to, I don't know, whatever it is, cycle up a hill, or run around the track or play a game of tennis. I did that today. If you feel you're doing that well, then actually that is going to add to your enjoyment, rather than really struggling and feeling so tired. Maybe you haven't fueled enough, or you haven't slept enough, and you're going to play a game of tennis for enjoyment, but then actually it ends up, it's not an enjoyment. It ends up a frustration, doesn't it? And so I guess that's my argument, is for, bearing all those factors in mind, right?
So that you can enjoy your exercise.
Enjoy and get the most out of it.
The E in exercise is for enjoyment. That's what one of our other podcast guests told me one time. So that's a good one.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about hormones specifically. I'd just love to hear it in your own words. So if we are talking about low energy availability or REDs, most of our hormones are suppressed. We're in that eco mode, as you mentioned it. So what are some things that we might see on a blood panel? Will we see low estrogen? Can you just kind of review that for people who maybe have gotten blood work done by a doctor? Like, what are some of the hormonal profiles of low energy availability or REDs?
Well, I suppose also, before we even look at the bloods, clinically, have you got regular periods? Yes, no. Because they're a very good indicator of your internal hormones. So I call periods the barometer of healthy internal female hormones. So first of all, if you're a woman, have I got regular periods? And also by periods, and I'm sure that Dr. Emily would have said this, by periods, just to clarify, we mean having periods, menstruation, bleeds, not on hormonal contraception.
Correct.
Okay, so just to be absolutely sure, we're talking about the same thing. If you're on the birth control pill, you guys call it over there, I call it the combined oral contraceptive. Anyway, if you're on the pill for contraception, then the bleeds you get on that, they're withdrawal bleeds, they're not your own periods. So if you're a woman and you're having regular menstrual cycles and you're not on the pill, then actually that's already a very good starting point.
So maybe you don't even necessarily need to look into it further if that's the case?
Well, I think that if you're feeling tired, I think I just want to sort of go through the stages. So that's the first thing.
Okay.
Just like a mental check, are my periods regular or not? I think even if you have regular periods, but you're just feeling super tired, then yes, I would still probably actually recommend you do a blood test, because you need to look at the female hormones, yes, but actually you probably need to check some others like the thyroid hormones and vitamin D and iron and other things. But my only thing about the blood tests we do for female hormones is that generally, and I know it's the same pretty much all over the world, we say, women, do your blood test on day 3 of your cycle. The reason we say that is because then we know it's at a fixed time, because we know that hormones do a variation, but it's a variation on a theme. Each individual woman will have a slightly different timing of it. So if you do it on a different day in your cycle, we're not going to know if the woman says, I did it on day 14. I don't know whether that for her is where that is in her cycle. Is it the follicular? Is it the luteal? Is it ovulation? I don't know. So that's why we say day 3. But the only problem with the day 3 is that I've seen women, even if they're amenorrheic, not having any periods, they've been told, your hormones are in the normal range. They are in the normal range, it's true, but they're right at the bottom, right to the bottom. So the hormones to look for sure, the female hormones, but with that caveat that they won't tell you everything. You need to know also what you're on the background of, are your cycles regular or not. So FSH, LH, estradiol, like you said, for day 3. Also, other hormones I always do would be the thyroid function. So TSH, T43, T3, very handy, gives you an indicator of short-term energy availability. So you said, is it worth doing other blood tests, other hormones? Yeah, so that would be the thyroid, you see. Even if a woman's having regular cycles and she comes and sees me and says she's feeling really tired, well, first of all, you'd obviously always take the clinical history, find out what the nutrition is, what the training is, and so you might get the obvious answer there. But then to back it up with that information, because people do want information, thyroid, vitamin D, I'm finding it's an interesting one because that affects well-being. And although we've had a heat wave here in the UK, generally we don't have so much sun, and so we're all recommended here to take vitamin D supplement over the winter. But actually, athletes, we need to be at a slightly higher level than the sedentary population. So vitamin D is an interesting one. I've come across it quite a lot, that it can be low in the cause of not just feeling a bit subpar, not great. Other ones that I would always do, you mentioned, these aren't hormones, this one so much, but iron, of course, for women is important. But other hormones I often do 9M cortisol, prolactin, because those are stress hormones. So if the person's got a really high training load, well, that's actually quite a good indicator. There can be other sources of stress because the body doesn't distinguish between stress, but it just gives you an overall picture, an internal check of where things are.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really great rundown. And vitamin D is so interesting. It's a vitamin, but it actually really is a hormone.
It's a hormone, exactly. It's a pro-hormone, exactly. It's a steroid hormone. Yay!
It's a hormone.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I sneak it in there. And it has synergistic effect with other hormones, with estrogen, for example. So even if your estrogen might be okay, but your vitamin D is low, then that's not ideal. Right. For your bone health, etc. So you need to take care of all these details.
Yeah, and I think getting all of these measured is important. Going back to what you said in the beginning, it's like a puzzle, right? So you might be missing your menstrual cycle, and we've got to kind of figure out why, right? If we look at, missing menstrual cycle and we see T3 is altered, well, maybe this is because of short-term energy availability, but maybe it has nothing to do with energy availability. Maybe your cortisol is skyrocketing. We're like, wow, this is stress related, Yeah,
that's a very good point you make, because cortisol, it just puts a dampener on all the hormones. And the reason is because if you are in a stressful situation, again, it's this diverting the energy to where you need it, you see, sort of principle. And, the brain, the boss of all the hormones, the hypothalamus, it doesn't distinguish. It doesn't have an email with the subject of the thing saying this stress is from training, this stress is from an argument with somebody, this stress is from whatever. You see, it doesn't know.
I wish it did.
Unfortunately, it doesn't. But it treats it all the same, but quite correctly, because even whether you're doing a hard training session or you're working really hard, actually you still need to put the energy into that. You see what I mean? So the brain doesn't distinguish where stress is coming from. It doesn't have the subject in the email. So the cortisol will go high, and the effect of cortisol is the fight and flight sort of thing, isn't it? And so again, like you say, it prevents the conversion of T4 to T3. And if we see someone, in medical terms, we see someone coming in, with a really acute overactive thyroid, yes, we give them a beta blocker to slow their heart down, but we also give them IV steroids because it prevents that conversion, you see. So yeah, you make a very good point about cortisol can sort of put a spanner in the works, but it's not really a spanner in the works. It's all this, there's a reason for everything that the body has. You know what I mean? So, but from our point of view, if actually we want energy for doing other things, we perceive it as a spanner in the works, but actually it's just a very efficient way of doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this has got me thinking as we're talking about how your hormones might be affected in low energy availability or REDS. Often with that, your first thing was, do we have regular periods? Yes or no? But that's kind of, if we're looking at it like, oh, I had my period and then maybe I lost it. It's become irregular. Maybe I want to look into my hormones as well, do this blood test. Is this different for some young athletes who might be experiencing what we call primary amenorrhea? So they haven't hit puberty yet, just delayed. They might be age 16, 17, 18 and have never had a menstrual cycle. Are these similar things going on with the hormonal profile, or does it look different?
It would be the same. I mean, so that's a very good point. We should just clarify on that. So amenorrhea means no periods. Primary amenorrhea means no periods. Well, in the UK, I would say by your 16th birthday. In the US, they say 15, but I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt and say if you're 15 years and 11 months, you see what I mean? But anyway, the point is it's 16, right? Yeah. On 16 and 0 months, if you have not had your periods, that's called primary amenorrhea, and it definitely needs medical investigation because most, depending on the situation, it could well be that it's the same etiology as secondary amenorrhea, which means your periods have started, but then they stop for 6 months or more. In the US, 3 months or more. But anyway, they stop for a certain number of cycles. But the mechanism of that could be the same. It could be low energy availability. So FSH will be low, FSH, LH will be low, estradiol will be low, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, lower end of the range. But the only difference, I guess, is if primary amenorrhea, because you never had a period, then there are some additional tests that sometimes we do just to make sure. Because if they've started and then they've stopped, we know that, well, at least they have started and the body does know what to do. Primary amenorrhea, occasionally there are some other additional tests like a genetic test just to check that there's no other reason going on. But otherwise, yes, it's the same picture on the bloods and the same underlying reason of low energy availability in REDS. But it's not great in either situation, whatever age you are. If your periods stop, it's not good. But I suppose if we're going to really say, probably the primary amenorrhea is of even more concern.
Yeah. Because
during the teenage years and your period starting, then your bone mineral density, you've probably heard Dr. Emily talking about that, you reach your peak bone mass early 20s. So if there's a break on that, then how are you going to climb up that hill to get, and that's what happens with lots of athletes. My other colleague, Kate Ackerman in the States, she's done some lovely work on this and shows that, the youngsters in their teenage years, even if they've got primary amenorrhea, they often turn around and say, oh, I haven't got a stress fracture. I'm not. But then her study shows that actually when the stress fractures happen is when they do reach their 20s. Mm-hmm. We have many examples of that where, the bones are actually they're still hopeful. I suppose the bones are still hoping that something will happen. But then by the time you come to your 20s and you've got primary amenorrhea, you haven't got any estrogen. And now you're moving into the senior ranks. You've got to train more, put more load through the bones, and the bones are just not up to it. And that's when she showed in her study, that's when all the stress fractures just explode if you've got primary amenorrhea. So I think that's the other important point we should make, that, and I'm sure you see it also.
Yes.
Lots of exercises. I'm going to be using that word from now on. Lots of exercises come and they've got amenorrhea, be it primary or secondary. And, they say, well, listen, I'm not sure. I think I'm fine. I feel fine. I haven't had a stress fracture. I'm doing fine. What's my motivation to change? Okay. And I sort of do I do the good and the bad cop. I do the bad cop and say, yes, you're fine now, but give it another 6 months or year or however long it might be, and it will catch up with you.
Yeah.
You will get a stress fracture. Your performance will start to tail off. But then also on the positive side, that if you make the changes now, change your behaviors now, then you're going to, number one, avoid the negative stuff. But actually, you've been underperforming, even though you're sitting there saying, I'm fine, I can do exercise, I'm doing quite well. Actually, you're selling yourself short, and you could reach who knows where. You're selling yourself short. You can't reach your full potential unless you've got your hormones on board. So it can also, that's how I always use it as a motivator to try and help people to change.
Yeah. And it's such a good motivator because I think for many years, people were and probably still are under the assumption of like, oh, if I don't have my period, maybe I'm more like a man and maybe that help, maybe that's better. But it's like, no, all of your hormones are suppressed. All of them.
The hormones, including testosterone. Exactly. Testosterone as well. Testosterone for lean but muscle mass. But also, to be fair, estrogen is really, really important. Bones, we've just mentioned. Cardiovascular health. That's why menopausal women, when estrogen levels go low, that's why they have a higher risk of cardiovascular health. Generally, I don't actually do a lipid profile on a woman that's amenorrheic because I know what it will show. I know it won't look good. But then the exerciser will get upset and think that she's eating too much fat when actually precisely the opposite. She's not eating enough, full stop. So actually...
Thank you for bringing that up. That's a huge point.
So estrogen is good. Estrogen is good for your bones. It's good for your cardiovascular health. It's also good for your neuromuscular system. Lovely study by Anna Mellon from Denmark. Women who amenorrheic, not having periods, they had a slower reaction time and peak power production compared to the eumenorrheic, regular menstruating women. So with estrogen is elixir for your health and your performance. So if you haven't got it, bones, cardiovascular, you're just not going to be good. And of course, mood is a neurotransmitter, serotonin. So you're also going to be you might kid yourself that you feel fine. Actually, genuinely, you might think you're okay, but it's like everything. You never know. I've had so many athletes who do manage to put in place these changes. It's a challenge. They do change and they come back and they say, oh my goodness, now I know. I do feel better. I thought I was fine, but now I feel better. I feel energized. And also, especially in dance, we need our fine motor control for ballet. And dancers coming back and saying, now I can pick up the steps more quickly and I can put in place the corrections. Because if anyone's listening doing ballet especially, you have to be really on the ball because the teacher will say, right, do rond plie, jeté, blah. They give you a thing of how to do it, right? A list, not list, just like, and you have to remember that immediately and put it immediately into practice. So if your brain is not up to speed, cognitive function, reaction time slow, it's not going to go well. So that's why estrogen is super important. And also, like you say, testosterone, the whole thing is switched off. The whole thing is in eco mode, remember? So, the testosterone, so you won't be more like a man.
Nope.
And actually, it doesn't work like that. No, it doesn't work like that. So,
and I agree with you. It's like people don't always know how bad they feel until they feel better. And then it's like, oh, yes, exactly. I do have more focus. I can I do have quicker reaction times. And then, as an exerciser or an athlete, whatever, then you finally do start, I did PR finally, it's like, and we have a few studies coming out with that of it's the research is always evolving, but we do have a few studies of some runners, and I think some swimmers of, amenorrhea versus eumenorrhea. Normal periods.
Yeah, the swimmers is a good example. The 400-meter time, they didn't improve so much. That one. Yeah, that one. You're thinking of, that one. They didn't improve their swim time so well. So I think that's also the other thing that we have absolute evidence that it affects your performance because lots of athletes might say, well, listen, I just, health, whatever, when I'm older, I'll deal with that. But actually the here and now of how you're going to perform as an athlete, exerciser, dancer, as you say, there's good evidence, neuromuscular skills, And also that's swimming study. And so actually your performance is going to suffer as well. So that kind of is counterproductive, isn't it?
Totally.
If you think you're doing this, going back, as if actually you think that you're going to improve your performance by being leaner, whatever, actually that's precisely the opposite. Or it gets to a tipping point.
Right.
Each of us has an individual optimal set point where our hormones are going to work at their best. And that's going to depend on our genetics, our personal physiology, and of course the type of exercise we're doing, right? Because how you fuel for, if you're, let's think of some extreme examples, how you fuel if you're an ultra endurance runner or weightlifter, should we have? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's going to be very different. It's going to be very different. So there is no generic, you need to eat X, Y, and Z, and then whatever. It's going to be individual depending on your sport and depending on you. So I think that's also where people make assumptions. Oh, well, so-and-so, a friend, was restricting their carbohydrates and suddenly they did a very good time. So, if I do the same, that will happen to me. But number one, it might not apply to you in any way. That person may have had one good performance, but let's see how they are in a couple of years' time, you see?
Right.
So that's the other thing. So try not to, think of, you're an individual, be proud of it, right?
And it's probably one of the hardest things for us to do, but so important to not compare just because somebody else is a certain size, weight, somebody else is eating a certain something or exercising at a certain level doesn't mean that that's inherently right for you, whether they're seeing success or not. We have to treat ourselves as individuals.
Yeah, well, we should be proud of that as well. I've got a lovely quote on that. It's actually it's not mine, unfortunately. It's actually from the Vice President of the Royal College of Obstetrics Gynecology here in the UK. And she said, treat women as individuals, not statistics.
Beautiful.
She was actually referring to HRT, but anyway, the principle is the same. That not only we wouldn't want to be treated as a statistic, would we? But why? And so we shouldn't treat ourselves as a statistic either. We should, we are individuals. So just take a moment to think what's right for you, what's going to make you the happiest, the most successful, etc.
And that really comes full circle too with, I think, what you specialize in, what I specialize in is like, wait, we know how prevalent disordered eating and RED-S is in female athletes, but let's treat you like an individual. Let's look at your blood biomarkers, your hormones. For me as a dietitian, let's look at how you're eating and figure out what the right steps are for you to fix this, because it might not be exactly the same for everybody. So we need to treat you like an individual.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I think that there's maybe some misconception that I've had people say, it's only for people with, that's not me, because it's only eating disorders. Eating disorders, they are medical conditions diagnosed by DSM criteria, et cetera. And, frankly, you have to be pretty ill, to have that. But this area you're talking about, disordered eating. And there was a lovely article in the BJ where they had a nice gradation of, optimal eating for the individual and an eating disorder, and then somewhere in the middle, disordered eating. And that can be very subtle differences. And actually, it's a really tricky one. And you have to be honest with yourself, really. If you say, no, I haven't got disordered eating, but actually, you have anxiety if you go to someone's house or you go out and someone presents you with something that you don't feel comfortable eating, like a plate of pasta, for example. Carbohydrates, for some reason, have particular bad press. I don't know if you have that same experience. So
we have the same issue in the US. Yes.
Yeah. So that's what we mean about the disordered eating. It's not. It's a subtle one, an orthorexia, or avoiding certain food types. And you look at the person, and the person externally looks healthy, right? But internally, their hormones tell a different story. Internally, that it's not looking so good.
It's probably the majority of my work and the majority of clients, athletes, exercisers that come to me is, they might say, well, I don't have an eating disorder. I'm like, okay, but we're doing some behaviors, actions with our food that aren't supporting our optimal health internally or our optimal performance, and still needs to be addressed.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, I think, an important point to make to people. if they think, oh, that can't be me, like you say, oh, I haven't got an eating disorder. No, you haven't, but you might have disordered eating or some variation on the theme. But it's still ultimately a psychological thing. And that's why, on the one hand, it's good. On the one hand, it's positive. On the one hand, if you have just got this imbalance in behaviors and your hormones aren't so great, eco mode, then the good news is you haven't got a medical condition that you need to go to hospital for and get, a medication. So that's great. But that's not to dismiss, to say that it's can sometimes be challenging to overcome. Changing behaviors is tricky. Some people don't realize it. I mean, I'm sure you have some exercisers who actually, they didn't realize that they needed to fuel so much for a 4-hour bike ride. My son's actually a rider. I don't know, people probably can't see this, so I've got tons of bikes in the background.
Yes.
Because my family is a cycling family. Anyway, my son he's a competitive cyclist, he's also a cycle coach. And he went cycling with someone the other day who couldn't believe they were saying, gosh, you eat a lot. Well, I mean, a lot. He was eating a banana and a bar at regular intervals. So not a lot, but compared to they weren't eating anything. So it might be that the person didn't realize that they needed to fuel this way. And that's actually quite straightforward. If you just say, well, actually, you didn't realize, fair enough, this is what you have to do, have some bananas in the back pocket, etc. It's sort of a bit more straightforward. But it's the people who are intentionally not fueling or avoiding food groups, why have they done that in the first place?
Yeah.
And so especially if you've got that ingrained behavior, you keep doing that, then that's tricky. So we do have to acknowledge it and say to everyone, yes, we know it's tough to change behaviors, but ultimately it's kind of, you have to. We're here to support, aren't we? Whatever methods it is to change those behaviors, because in the long run, number one, you're going to be happier, like we said, and actually you're going to achieve the goals that you want to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good motivation to seek that help. You don't have to be a certain level of sickness or problems or diagnosis to seek help for yourself. And that's probably a really big population of people who resonate with what you're expressing. And so, people like yourself over in the UK and people like me over here in the US, like we're here to support all those people as well. Excellent. I wanted to ask you, we talked about amenorrhea and we talked about primary amenorrhea. How about, this is confusing. How about things like peri-menopause? Like, what can women do as they're going through those initial stages of menopause and hormones are out of whack? Is there anything we can do? Is testing helpful, or is it just wait it out? And, what can be done during those time periods?
Well, here in the UK, I'm very proud to say that we've managed to figure out a way of getting more insights into hormones, because like I've said, it's very tricky, female hormones. Doing it on day 3, it gives you some information, but very limited. So here we've just figured out a way of applying artificial intelligence techniques.
Good. I was going to ask you about this.
So this is this is actually very helpful for perimenopause, which we'll come to, but also athletes who are wondering, have I got low energy availability and am I recovering from this? So the principle is, the way you really would want to do it would be to do a blood test every single day of the cycle and plot the graph. Right now, obviously, that's not going to happen.
No, too difficult.
Not going to do that. Too expensive anyway. So not going to happen. But this is where clever mathematical modeling comes in. And actually, you only need to do 2 samples we've worked out. And you can estimate, if you will. Just like you do in an experiment at school, you take a certain number of readings and you plot the best fit line. You have to sort of fill in the gaps. You can't be in the laboratory at school every single, minute taking all the readings or whatever, right? So that's the principle of it. And why would you want to do that? Why do we want to know those fluctuations? Is because the detail of the hormones, right? The detail of the hormones, what's happening. And by doing this, we can distinguish, because I had lots of athletes in their 40s who come and say to me, I'm not feeling so great. Am I perimenopause? Or have I got low energy availability? So I'm like, I do the thyroid test, and that to date, what I've done is I've, done what I can. It could be vitamin D after all. It could be the thyroid function gives us an idea about the energy availability. But actually, it's pretty tricky. It's very difficult to distinguish just on symptoms because after all, perimenopause, the period is becoming irregular. That can also happen in the build-up with low energy availability and the recovery from low energy availability. So that's how I would be able to distinguish by doing this mathematical modelling. I can then more confidently say, yes, this is perimenopause, or actually it's a low energy availability issue. Okay. And then that will help direct. I mean, I suppose you could argue for either a woman, whoever you are, you need to be looking at your nutrition, like we said, but more targeted, more personalized advice. And I'm also finding this approach very useful for women who are recovering from low energy availability, who have had amenorrhea and then their periods restart. And generally, I say, wait till you've had 3 periods and before you start changing up your training. But I don't really, well, when I say I don't really know, I mean, after all, menstruation is the barometer of healthy internal hormones, but to really get the detail, is every single thing working as it should? If I do this test, then I can reassure them and say, yes, ovulation's happened and we're all good, we can. Or I've had an athlete recently who I said, I'm sorry that it did something, but it wasn't quite what we wanted. So I'm afraid we can't count that one as the 3, or we got that one doesn't count sort of thing. But the perimenopause group, what happens at perimenopause is totally different to the low energy availability. So low energy availability, we said that goes into eco mode. Everything goes down. LH, FSH, estradiol, progesterone, go low. Perimenopause, the fault is actually that of the ovaries. The ovaries just become a bit tired. They go into retirement.
They've been working out their whole life.
They've been working hard. They've been working, exactly. So, but the email hasn't been sent to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus it just gets very annoyed with the ovaries and says, look, can you try a bit harder? So it sends out very high levels of FSH and LH. So this now is totally different.
Totally different.
Low energy availability, everything low. Perimenopause, menopause, one's too high and too low. And so you quite easy, well, when I say you can, if you do what I've described, distinguish. But otherwise, it's very difficult on just what the person says. But for the perimenopausal group, and after all, we should all be exercising as we get older. Really, really important. So I see lots of masters athletes who they want to continue competing and training, and they want to be feeling good and not miserable. So actually knowing that uncertainty, am I perimenopausal or not? It's horrible. I'm speaking from experience. I'm quite old, right? You just like, you don't know for sure. But if you know, okay, fine, then at least you can feel you're in control. It's like, okay, this is what it is. This is what I need to do to try and manage the symptoms. And this is the homework reading I need to do to go and look up about HRT so that you can make a really good informed decision, rather than wondering in limbo, wondering what's going on. And then eventually your periods, every woman's periods will stop at menopause. And then you're there and it's like, oh, fine. So that's what it was. And now you're in a little bit of you're not feeling great anyway, by the way, because your estrogen's low, so your brain isn't working, And so actually, and then you like, no, now I've got to make a decision about the HRT. It was a bit of you haven't got that time to really consider and look at your options.
Yeah, that was a wonderful explanation. And so this artificial intelligence to track that you're talking about, is this, this is something you're doing research with and kind of working with right now. Is it available for other people? Is it newly?
Well, it's not available. Well, we're trying to figure this out.
Okay.
It's up and running as a commercial product here in the UK. So I work with a company called Full. So I'm really proud we got it up and running. So if you live in the UK, we can do it, but we are looking to absolutely extend this worldwide because we want all women to have this hormone intelligence.
Yes, right? I want it. I want this.
Yeah. So at the moment, I've just got a kind of some doctor friends and friends who are sending me their results, and I'm doing it. When I say manually, I'm running the model for them. But in the long term, hopefully, yes, we're going to set it up a way wherever you live, US or whatever, you send your results and then we can make the model. But obviously, because we've made it, we're not giving this model away, right? Right, we've got it here in the UK, but we absolutely want to. The whole reason I did all of this was because I saw there was a massive need. Women need to know.
Yeah.
Women need to know what's happening with their hormones. And so, yes, ultimately, I'm passionate about making this available worldwide. I mean, like if you did want to do it, by the way, you can send me your results. I'll tell you about it, and I can enter them in and put them in. But hopefully are working on that we can collaborate internationally, because ultimately it's a data transfer thing, which definitely is not my thing. But I know for sure it's possible.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And so, that's a reason to, follow you. I know you have a blog written about this on your website, so we'll include that in the show notes.
Yes, people can, they can look at that. And also there's a blog I wrote for the BJSIM, British Journal of Sports Medicine. So yeah, people want, but it's sort of very similar to what I have on my website. So you can see the rationale and also, just sort of stay in touch and
be on the lookout. Yeah.
Look out for when we do figure out, or the tech. When I say we figure out, I'm definitely not figuring out the tech. I've done the medical bit, right? When the tech is in place, that we can offer this literally worldwide. There's no reason why we can't. It's just, as I say, the technical aspects of it, and of course it's got to be secure data and all this. But that's possible. That's what happens in the world already. So it will definitely happen. But we've got it up and running, and everything is great in the UK, and I'm using it already with a lot of people, athletes and dancers I work with. So I can absolutely say it's proving very, very useful, and hopefully it will be available for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited to follow that, and see the progress with it. Like you said, you've done the work as a doctor and a researcher. The science is there. It's just getting the technology to follow suit. Good thing technology moves fast these days. So,
well, that is very, very true. And especially, we've got a good team at Forth. They know what they're doing, the tech wise, and made the app and everything. So that's definitely not my area of expertise. But you're right. There's definitely the possibilities to make this happen relatively soon.
And regardless of the AI, I think a big takeaway from our conversation today too is to really empower women with their hormones and understanding them, getting knowledge. If you think something is off, these are good things to investigate, to get blood work done, to get hormone testing, to work with a sports endocrinologist like yourself, and try and put the pieces of the puzzle together, because they are so powerful in your health, in your mood, in your performance, in your athletics and exercise journey. And so we really want to empower women to, take control of their hormones.
Yeah. And also that positive, the other thing we discussed is that, so you're empowered with that information to make good choices, because your choices do influence your hormones. Mm-hmm. So if you know that your hormones, maybe, for example, your hormones show that you are actually underfueling, and then fine, now you know what to do. You go and look at your nutrition, and then that will make a difference to your hormones, to make them happy and make you happy. Mm-hmm. So so it empowers you. You have the information, but it also then enables you to make good decisions what to do next. So it's a sort of a feedback loop. There's a feedback loops in the hormones in the body.
Yep.
You see happening. There's also a bigger feedback loop going to the outside. So you need to, factor that in for your decisions, because it's your choices, your behavioral choices with these things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Keay, for coming on and having this conversation with us, empowering women across the world with their hormones, and kind of dropping so much knowledge. There was so much information. So I should have put a warning at the beginning of this podcast to bring out a pen and notebook to take notes. You might have to listen to it a couple times over again. If you have your own services for the UK, if you want to take a moment to let people know how they can reach out, how they can find you, if they're interested in working with you, where can they find you?
So yeah, if you want to put a link to my website, nickykayfitness.com. I am based in the UK, but I do offer advisory virtual appointments to people, and I've worked with a couple of athletes, exercisers in the US, Australia, New Zealand. So that's certainly possible. And anyway, on my website, I try and put blogs and information, and including the AI that we talked about, so people can go there. And I also give quite a few presentations. I was just at the Female Athlete Conference with Dr. Emily and Dr. Kate Ackerman that arranged it. And I've got one presenting at Barca, for example. So, if you go there, you can see if you're interested in listening to me doing a presentation at the next thing, or blogs, what I'm up to and all that sort of thing. So that's a really good starting point. And then if you're curious, although it's not yet available worldwide, if you go to the fourth website, also, you can see what it looks like. They got a mock-up of what happens, what it looks like on the app, how it works and everything like that. So you can sort of get a sneak preview of hopefully what's coming to you soon.
Yeah, so exciting. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again, Dr. Keay. We'll include all of that, all the links in the show notes for people to reach out to you if they need to learn more about their selves and their hormones.
Cool. Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining. I really hope you enjoyed that episode, and thanks for listening. But before I let you go, I have free resources that you can have access to right away, right now, so that you can start fueling your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. First, I have your Red S recovery race. If you've ever wondered if you might be struggling with Red S, curious to learn more, or know you have Red S and are looking to recover fast, then you can head to www.riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS and download the Red S Recovery Race. See how you place and figure out the next steps to recovery. Plus, while there, I have a few other great resources for you, including 3 nutrition secrets that every elite athlete swears by, and access to a private Facebook community, Female Athlete Nutrition. So again, to gain access to all of this, head to riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS. That's /REDS. And you can gain access and get the help you need fast. Too many girls and women and female athletes struggle with nutrition, but you don't have to any longer. Become fierce, fit, and fueled. Links in the show notes, and I'll see you next time.